We've talked about plenty of on-track action to start the season, so let's talk about some off-track stuff now because it's getting spicy. So I haven't touched a lot on penalties and suspensions because they're not usually that very common, especially early in the season, unless it's a huge one like Chase Briscoe's, but even then that one was overturned, and we'll talk about that in a moment because Joe Gibbs Racing, they did win the appeal. But other penalties that were handed out in the first 3 weeks, the front row 34 and Rick Ware 51, they were penalized 10 points at Daytona for an infraction relating to the ballast, which is pretty unfortunate for Gilliland, especially because he would be in the top 16 in points right now if it wasn't for that penalty. Of course, Kyle Larson for the loose wheel at Coda. The 5 team would lose 2 of their crew members for the next 2 weeks. Of course, I'm not gonna get into that because we all know what the penalty is. We've been there before. We've seen drivers lose wheels on the track before. Speaking of drivers that would be pretty high in the points if not for a penalty, Austin Cindric. And this caught me a bit by surprise because I thought NASCAR would take a look at it, but wouldn't do anything about it, what happened between him and Ty Dillon. Especially considering that this is not the first time that Cindric has right-hooked one of the Dillon brothers, because if you remember Gateway 2023, he did a similar thing to Austin Dillon. And my instant reaction to this was, wow. And also, NASCAR probably did this to make up for the fact that they didn't penalize Cindric right then and there, because something tells me that if they held him like 2 laps for rough driving during the race, I don't think they would have given him a 50-point penalty. Maybe they would have given him like minus 25 in addition to the in-race penalty, whatever many laps that would have been. But regardless, this should serve as a clear message moving forward that NASCAR is not playing around. No right rear or left rear hooking of any kind no more, be it on an oval or a road course. Now, there was some debate going on as to whether Cindric should have been suspended instead, but considering that this happened at a road course instead of an oval where speeds are much faster, maybe that's why NASCAR decided to go this route, especially since 50-point penalties, roughly the equivalent of a full race's worth of points. I know, assuming you win or score a bunch of stage points and finish somewhere in the top 5, top 10. And given that Cindric very rarely reaches a 50-point mark for a single race, it's gonna take him 2, maybe even 3 races just for him to make up that gap. So you could rationalize this being a good alternative to a suspension, where instead of parking the guy for 1 race, you penalize in the rough equivalent in points instead. So in conclusion, yeah, even if it goes a bit against the precedent NASCAR has set where right hook equals automatic suspension, I personally do not have a big issue with it because I feel like the results should also matter. Lower speeds, no caution, no significant damage, no one else was involved. Like, that was not suspension worthy to me back when it happened. Still not suspension worthy to me now. But yeah, NASCAR just sent a message that right hooking, you're either getting suspended or you're getting penalized like huge points. Either or. So, that would have made it 4 points penalties in 3 races. And also the suspension to the 5 team. But like I said, loose wheel doesn't cost you any championship points. It only costs you suspensions for crew members. But like I said, the JGR 19 penalty was recently overturned, which means that Chase Briscoe no longer has negative points. And thank goodness too, because he would have still been minus 28 otherwise. So Briscoe is back in the playoff picture, and his chances of locking himself in just increased big time, because now if he doesn't win, there's a good chance he makes it in on points, assuming there's not that many surprise winners below the cut line. That being said, I still have him winning 1 to 2 races on the year, and that remains unchanged for me. That didn't change after the penalty, so it wouldn't change before or during or after it. Like, I always had Briscoe winning a race or 2 this season. On that same token, I still think James Small needs to go. That penalty being overturned doesn't change that. As a matter of fact, I feel like this could hurt Briscoe in the long run, because it means that he will be stuck with James Small for who knows how long, either until JGR finally decides to give him the boot, or he gets suspended later down the road for another rules infraction or whatever. Now, of course, this has caused some discourse on social media, like it always does, saying that NASCAR is rigged for Toyota and JGR paid NASCAR under the table, the usual stuff. people immediately pointing to the Parker Kligerman situation at the Daytona Truck Race and how the team lost their appeal. And this is just funny for the sake of here we go again, but it's also infuriating how many NASCAR fans miss the simple reason why JGR won their appeal and Henderson Motorsports didn't. The bigger teams have a better chance at winning appeals because they have more resources and thus they can afford to put in more effort into getting a penalty overturned. It's not that hard to understand. There's no conspiracy theory or any nefarious motive involved here. I'm just saying, the same people who cried when Hendrick Motorsports, they won their appeal back in 2023 after the Spring Phoenix race. They're the same people celebrating this Chase Briscoe penalty getting overturned and vice versa. But moving on to the more juicy stuff, we have an update on the ongoing 2311 and Front Row Motorsports lawsuit against NASCAR. So basically, the sanctioning body has just filed a counterclaim against 2311 and Front Row, alleging that the way they tried to quote-unquote boycott the contract negotiations, by the way, they're referring to the charter negotiation, to the charter agreement of last year. The deal was set to expire last year and it was renewed for 7 years, as well as them filing a lawsuit for better contract terms. Those two actions, they represent, in the eyes of NASCAR, a violation of antitrust laws. In addition, NASCAR has also filed an injunction themselves asking for the elimination of guaranteed spots for all charter teams, and this is not just 2311 and Front Row, but all 36 teams. Because according to them, if the charter agreement is deemed unlawful, we might as well remove the perks that come with owning one, meaning that no one will get a guaranteed spot for every race moving forward. Now, of course, if this were to happen, this change will take place starting in 2026 because the season is already underway, but also because if the case goes on for, I believe, until the end of the year, it will go to trial in December, from what I read. And honestly, this is just silly, in my opinion, because NASCAR is clearly in desperation mode at this point. If they think that removing the whole guaranteed starting spot for every race benefit the charters bring will deter those guys from continuing with the lawsuit, it won't stop them. If anything, this is playing right into Denny Hamlin's hands. This is exactly why his 2311 team and Front Row, they did not sign that charter agreement, and instead they went with the lawsuit in the first place. They want to not only force NASCAR to open their books and show the world exactly where the money goes, but they also want to create a pathway that will eventually lead to the charter system being removed as a whole in the near future. And not only that, but you're also potentially opening the door for more teams to support Denny Hamlin and company, and even joining in on the legal battle by filing lawsuits of their own, because outside of those teams that sued, every other team signed the charter agreement. And on short notice too. I believe last year NASCAR gave everyone else like less than 24 hours to sign on the dotted line, or else they were pretty much forcing them into doing so. So it's really funny seeing NASCAR complain about antitrust laws when the way they went about getting teams to sign the new agreement was pretty much coercion. Now, could this lead to all teams banding together and boycotting the sport? I do not think it would be that drastic, and I don't think it would happen. This would be like doomsday, absolute doomsday scenario, worst comes to worst. But if the door on that was locked before, NASCAR just unlocked it just in case. Because those teams that signed the agreement, they did it in part because they wanted all of their full-time entries to be guaranteed a spot on the grid for every single race of the year. So with NASCAR removing that for all teams as well, not just 2311 and Front Row, but like for everyone, I don't know. I don't think they would take too kindly to that. Right now, the only way I can see NASCAR coming out of this as somewhat of a winner is if 2311 and Front Row, they drop the lawsuit and ask for a settlement for whatever reason, which I really doubt will happen because, like I said, this is exactly what Hamlin and Bob Jenkins and all those people want. It's the complete removal of the charter system. The power is now in their hands. And even their attorney knows what's up. Like, they know NASCAR's losing the case, and this latest development is just them being desperate and trying to save themselves by launching an empty threat. So I guess we just have to wait and see how long NASCAR can hold up. Because now that 2311 and Front Row have them right where they wanted, They're not budging.